why are we talking about social media? I know for a lot of people in the field of pharmacovigilance and a lot of regulators, it's not really a priority. It feels quite far out there, or maybe it's a little bit too modern, well, maybe too youthful, maybe too unserious. But we do need to understand how social media is changing communications quite fundamentally, and we need to understand how to adjust to this change. And what is the role of social media and pharmacovigilance is also something that we're going to look at. And this pharmacovigilance and healthcare and public health in general, actually. Let's start here. A global digital snapshot from January this year. So on the planet we have about 7.5 billion people. Internet penetration is about 3.8 billion. So roughly half of all the people in the world have internet. Out of that, in the middle you can see about 2.8 billion, a penetration of 37%, are on social media. So out of all of you in this room, how many here have a social media account of some sort? Facebook maybe, or that's probably everyone. Yeah. Well, there you go. Internet penetration, I just want to show this really quick. How relevant social media is to you and your country depends a little bit on where you are, how the internet and social media situation looks in your country. This is social media penetration, particularly. It's quite high, actually. Generally, Central Asia is a little bit low there with 7%. But generally, the Americas, I think, look like the sort of most active region, which also, from a personal experience on Facebook, I can say our UMC's Facebook account is definitely getting most attention from people in the Americas in general. Now, when you're talking about social media, which we're going to get into a little bit more in a few slides, what is important for you to know, which platforms are important for you, that depends on your country. So we have a few global giants. Facebook, obviously, 1.8 billion users. That's a lot of users. I mean, there are more people on Facebook than there are in China. But a lot of the other social networks that come a little bit further down, like they're quite regional. So again, China being a big country, you know, they have Baidu and Sina Weibo and some of these that are essentially not used at all in Europe. So you have to find out what are the big networks in your country or in on your continent, in your region. What we need to understand about social media is that the importance of it is not actually the technologies themselves. It is the fact that it has changed a lot of behaviors. It's a new form of communication. It has turned what used to be a sort of top-down communications channel a little bit on its head. So it used to be that publications or organizations would publish their information and it would seep down to the audience. Now we have a situation where the audience is creating content. Everyone is creating content. Everyone who has their own private Facebook account or their organization's Facebook account, they're all creating, and it's sort of seeping up. Another change is also that it's become a main news source for many people, particularly younger people. They don't really read the news anymore, but they're on Facebook and they get all their information from Facebook or from Twitter or from whatever account they're using, whatever platform they're using. And what's it good for? I mean, ultimately, why are we on social media? Why should we consider being on social media? Actually, how many of your organizations have like official social media accounts? Well, there's a few of you. That's good. Which accounts, which networks are you on? Are you Facebook, Twitter? Twitter? Okay, Facebook and Twitter. Uh, the interaction aspect is obviously the most important. This is a chance to actually talk directly to your audiences. Dissemination is also important. If you consider from a regulatory perspective, if you have some kind of medical emergency or a healthcare emergency, you really quickly need to get information out there. To get a whole press release or whole information leaflet out there, that requires a lot of time. Someone has to draft it, someone has to approve it, it has to be reviewed, etc., etc. But on social media, you only need to get 3 or 4 sentences approved. So particularly in difficult situations when it's quite urgent, social media can be your first step to informing the public or informing your audience of what's happening. And it doesn't take as much time to get a small paragraph of text approved for publication as it does to get a whole information leaflet. And then obviously you still need to bring out the bigger information package later on. You need to follow up with something, but it can be a first step. Reach is very important. Social media allows you to reach people that otherwise you would not have access to. People who otherwise would not listen to you or really be interested in what you're doing. Personalized and targeted. Essentially what happens on social media, if you share a post and someone in your audience chooses to repost that is kind of like a recommendation. It's not just you saying this is important information about a certain medicine. It is that particular user saying that I recommend that you read this. So this information is good. Leverage audience networks. It means that you're reaching out to your own audiences, but you also have the potential of reaching their audiences. So imagine if you have a post and it's shared 10 times by your followers, and each of these followers get 10 shares. So obviously it will grow exponentially. The bottom line of social media is that it does inform the public of important health information, which is hopefully what we're all aiming to do. Advocacy. How important this is for you and your organization, it sort of depends on what you're doing a little bit. Social media is a very powerful tool for advocacy or awareness campaigns and things like that. It's also a way for you to show the personality of your organization. It's a way for you to show what you care about and which causes you care about or which issues you care about. It's a way for you to show that you care about people. Again, when your audience shares your messages, they're adding something personal. They're adding their own recommendation to their network. And we are more and more used to having our policymakers, our politicians, and people high up and public figures. They're more and more involved in social media. But that also means that audiences are more used to having access to these people. And maybe they wonder if you're not on social media, maybe they wonder where you are. So they're used to having access, and they want access to you as well. As I said before, it's a very good vehicle to bring real-time attention to issues that are happening right now. Now I'm going to show you a few examples of some social media campaigns. This is UN's wildlife preservation campaign. It's called Wild for Life. On social media, you want to engage your audience. You want them to listen to you and to care about your message. And you want to make it fun. That's a little bit, quite often, you engage people when they think it's fun. So the UN created this campaign where they collected all these famous people and they made this kind of picture where you have the person and whichever animal they choose and this little text. I am Giselle Bunchen, I am a sea turtle. But then they also created a tool for making this kind of image yourself. So besides just spreading this information on social media, they also gave all the users the opportunity to create their own sort of campaign brochure. And I really like this. I thought this was a really good idea. And then they obviously got some famous people. We have Jane Goodall. I always think of her as the monkey lady. It's probably not very nice, but the lady who spent her entire life researching gorillas. And this, I'm showing you, this is me. So obviously it doesn't look as nice as these other ones, but I created it to see what it would look like. You just upload your own picture, you choose your own favorite animal, and you become a part of this campaign. It becomes very personalized. But in essence, you're also campaigning for the UN. And that's where you want to give your audience a little bit of a reward, right? They're carrying your message further, and they want a reward. And the reward in this case is that it's maybe they think it's fun, or it boosts their image as someone who really cares about elephants, in my case, or whatever issue you're trying to promote. And now, obviously, not everyone has the capacity or the funding or the time to do something as advanced as this. I just want to show you some examples of how you can get your audience engaged more actively. Now, a couple of days ago, you had Mitol here from MHRA. He was talking about the social media campaign that Scope has carried out over Europe. They've also made this fake meds campaign on Twitter. MHRA, that is, not Scope. Let's see if this works. It does. This is what their post looks like. Right, so this is a slightly absurd take on diarrhea in this case. And the problem is, for us in this field, if you're talking to the general public, pharmacovigilance is a little bit boring. Side effects are a little bit boring. Fake medications, it's boring. You may need to try to think outside the box and grab attention. And I really like this. I thought this was a fun way for them to show what's happening. And maybe for a lot of you here, this is ridiculous. This is for children. But if you're talking to people who are not healthcare professionals, this message is easier for them to absorb and pay attention to than if you just put out a text that says, don't buy fake medicines because it can give you diarrhea. It doesn't really register. Social media isn't only interesting and fun, and it's not only opportunities. There are also some dangers with social media. I don't think we should be scared of it, but we should be aware of it. So first of all, the internet never forgets. And you need to remember this also as private people using your own personal Twitter accounts or Facebook accounts. Everything you put out on the internet, all your photos, everything, it will remain there somewhere, even if you delete it. And, realistically, it would probably take a very skilled hacker to be able to dig up your old photos from Facebook from 10 years ago, and really, who's going to care about that? But if someone really wants to, they actually can. There is a risk to get bad press in a public digital space. I think that we should think of social media as a town square. Everyone is there, everyone can see what you're talking about, and they can also see what other people are talking about when they're talking about you. So if something bad happens in your organization or you make a mistake, you can face some backlash. There are ways to handle this, which I will give you some examples in a little bit. Another danger on social media is language barriers. Again, this depends on if you're having accounts that are primarily aimed to people in your own country. You are speaking the local language or languages, depending on where you are. You have an understanding for the culture. For us at UMC, the entire globe is our audience. So we have to pay attention to making sure that we don't write ambiguous posts. Maybe something that I write that is understood as a joke by Swedish people or British people would be taken serious by someone from somewhere else. So you have to keep it very simple to avoid misunderstanding, and don't be ambiguous, and be a bit funny, but not so funny that you're risking people actually misunderstanding what you're saying. A lot of people, or should I say, a lot of organizations hesitate about social media because they want to be entirely in control of what is published and what is said about them at all times. And they think social media sounds a little bit scary. It's pretty fast-paced. If you have social media accounts that are active, they're probably run by someone like me. So you have a communications person who's running your social media accounts. It's not really feasible to have that person run everything they're going to post on Facebook by your highest boss. I mean, really, I think your bosses all have better things to do than read future posts. So I believe that that's one of the reasons that a lot of organizations actually choose to not be on social media. But there's some problems with that. And the first one is that the conversation is happening with or without you. Can you really afford to not be a part of it? Because just because you're not there, because you're not present on social media, doesn't mean that people aren't talking about your organization, or aren't talking about medicines, or aren't talking about side effects. So I would say it's better to be there and be active and take those conversations, be a part of those conversations, or at the very least have half a chance to follow them so you understand what people are concerned about. As I mentioned before, audiences have higher expectations on being able to interact with organizations. And this goes with everything, like all our politicians, all our public figures. So they may very well miss you if you're not there. Again, I'm repeating myself because I'm going to talk more about this. Audience habits are changing. Social media may be the primary source of news and information. Now, social media is the only news source. Here's the really, really dark side of that. There's a problem with that. We are living in an age of fake news. We're living in Donald Trump's post-truth era, whatever that means. There is a lot of rubbish information out there, particularly on social media, particularly because anyone can post anything at any time. I'm sure you've all come across conspiracy theorists or people who believe that their governments are trying to poison the population by insisting on certain vaccines or whatever it is. There's a lot of bad information out there. So if you have a situation where you have a group of people, say teenagers up to 25-year-olds, they get all their information from social media, and half of the information they're getting is fake. This, for the bottom line, for your bottom line, this is very bad. The health literacy and the understanding of how medicines and healthcare works, it can really be undermined and can really be damaged in this situation. We don't need to read through all of this. I just want to show you some. So this is from December last year. BuzzFeed, which generally is not a news source I would recommend, because they're sort of in the in-between space between being a news outlet and being a social media sort of clickbait site. But they actually did a study of the top fake political news stories at that time. And you can see the amount of Facebook shares that these got. I mean, the top one, Obama signs executive order banning the Pledge of Allegiance in schools nationwide, with 2.2 million Facebook shares. the problem here is also, if you look at this URL, abcnews.com.ko, this looks like a real news site. There is an ABC News. Many of us know that. This is not their actual URL. This is a fake URL. I can't remember exactly what their URL is, but it's something quite similar. So it's a very clever way. If people aren't careful, they read it, they think it's a real news article. And then you have something like this, tmsaidhiphop.com. Okay, probably not a news source, right? But people still share it. Now this is just in general, in politics and in current affairs. Fake news are, I mean, they're used as a tactic by political opponents to sort of slander their rivals. But in health news, this is also very important. I find this story was called Revealed How Dangerous Fake Health News Conquered Facebook, from January this year. And to cite it, of the 20 most shared articles on Facebook in 2016 with the word cancer in the headline, more than half of the report claims were discredited by doctors and health authorities. This is a reality that we're facing. And again, in healthcare, health literacy, I mean, sure, it varies across different segments of the population and from one population to another. But it's a difficult field to understand for laymen. And if you're reading these fake news, it looks credible, and you can't necessarily determine if it's real or not. But I think that it's, if you have half of these articles being discredited, that's really quite telling for the kind of problems that we're facing. And I mean, I should also mention that obviously fake news is not just a problem for social media, but it is easier to share through social media. It spreads faster, and it allows for self-publishing. It allows for amateurs or people with other agendas to publish and share information that's not accurate for whatever reason, whatever motivation they may have. So here's the question. How do we fake news? No, how do we fight fake news? Do you have any suggestions?
Not to share that. Not to share it on the social media.
Not to share the information, of course. Is there anything else we can do?
You can even report it.
Release an official statement. If you have a particular news item, you can report it to Facebook. I actually think that is, ideally that would work. I think in practicality, very often it doesn't work because Facebook is, like, they're too slow to respond, or they're not really censored, right? So it's not really legal to share fake news. Like, there's no function really to sort of ban that.
The Facebook people,
Yep.
respond.
Yep. Any other ideas?
Sharing and writing is fake, and then everyone shares this one with the fake
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you try to, exactly, release an official statement or write a post saying there's been a lot of rumors about this medication causing these side effects. It's not true. Any other ideas? So I believe in sharing good, solid, trustworthy information. That's actually why we're talking about this, because I want to encourage you to embrace social media, to counteract the slew of bad information with real and reliable information. So one thing that we're doing at UMC on our Facebook account, for example, is that whenever we share an article that's not from us, which we do sometimes, maybe it's a news article about patient adherence or whatever it might be, the first thing that I do is make sure that the source is stated. It's from Reuters News, or it's from the New York Times, or whatever source. So immediately when people see it, they can see that this is the source. And then if you don't trust Reuters, okay, maybe you don't trust the article, but at least I'm not trying to make it look like UMC is saying this, or this is 100% accurate according to the WHO. I'm saying that this is from Reuters or whatever. And I really think that as health professionals or pharmacovigilance professionals, we can make a difference here. But we need to put in the effort to approach these audiences who are receiving all this bad information on their terms, on the platforms that they're active on. Just really quick before we finish up, we want to talk about you as individual people on social media, and then I'm going to talk about you as organizations on social media and things that you need to bear in mind. As private people, we need to remember that there's only one online persona. If you have a Facebook account and you have a LinkedIn account and you have a Twitter account, and on LinkedIn you only share professional news and you're being very strict and very proper, and on Facebook you only share your party pictures where you're, you know, dancing on tables and you're drinking a lot and you're smoking a lot or whatever. You have to understand that there is a connection between these two accounts. You may think that they're separate because they're in different networks, but in reality, you are showing a part of yourself on every network. Now, I think most of us are at an age or started using social media at an age where we're maybe a bit more mature. So there's probably fewer party pictures and more, on Facebook, maybe more family photos or things like this. But you want to be aware of what you're sharing because you are showing a part of yourself. Your accounts can be found by different people. It's also more and more common that employers do a social media search and actually check up. If they're recruiting new people, they will check up people on social media and sort of see who they are. Now, the reason we're talking about this is not because I'm not here to tell you what to share on Facebook. But your account and you as a person can very often be linked to your organization. So just, don't be a moron. It can actually reflect quite badly on your organization. Don't be offensive. If you have party pictures, maybe that's not the end of the world. But if you're really offensive, or if you use a lot of bad language, or if you're really racist toward one group or another, it can make your organization look bad. I had actually removed that slide, but I think it was last year you had a very young footballer in Spain who was hired by FC Barca or something, a Barcelona football team, and he was fired 7 hours later. He was hired and fired over a span of 7 hours because that's how long it took all the fans of this football team to find tweets that he'd shared 2 years before when he was playing for an opposite team, cursing the Barcelona team. And it was such an outrage that they just fired him. And that's, poor guy, he was 21. He had such a great chance and he lost it because some stupid old tweets. And again, the internet never forgets. Everything you put out there, evidenced by the fact of this young footballer. 2 years ago, it doesn't matter. It's still there somewhere. Someone can find it. Now, organizations, if you're not on social media already and you're considering getting on social media, which I hope you are, you need to start with defining a bit of a strategy. What's the purpose of your presence on social media? Who's your audience? What is your main message? You need to understand differences between platforms. Again, Facebook is used privately by a lot of people. It's good for a more relaxed, more conversational tone. LinkedIn is mostly a professional network. It's suitable for a more professional tone, more work-related things. And again, what are the platforms that are most relevant and most used in your countries? Understanding the basics of your audience is also important. So maybe you have a platform that's almost only used by teenagers. Okay, maybe you think initially this is not my primary concern. But then again, these teenagers, what information do you want them to have? And can you trust that they get this information somewhere else? And if you can't trust that and you want them to have information, you need to go on those platforms. So really short on succeeding on social media. You need to be frequent and consistent. Frequent doesn't mean that you have to post 10 times a day. It can even mean posting once a week. The main thing is that you don't post 10 times 1 week and then you don't post anything for 8 weeks, because then there's no reason for people to follow you. You know, they want to see something coming up. Social media accounts tend to grow gradually, and that's okay. You can start small. You can start with 100 followers, and in a year you may have 500, and in 3 years maybe you have 5,000, and you know, good for you. Frame your focus. Most of our organizations, we already have a focus, so that's the easy part. Allies and ambassadors. If you're active on social media, even when you're tweeting as an organization, so or posting on Facebook, whatever, you will soon realize that there are some people who are very keen on interacting with you, and they like to share your content and they like to comment on your posts. These are your potential allies. It doesn't hurt to acknowledge them and give them a little bit of a nod sometimes, or click like if they share your post, or say thank you if they share something, because that will encourage them. They'll be really excited about hearing from you. You know, they're tweeting or talking about your organization, and you're actually responding to them. It creates a personal bond. You should be personal, but professional, even when it's tedious. I recently had someone write randomly on Facebook that she couldn't reach our info email inbox on YouTube. So, no, sorry. She wrote it on Facebook. So our general email is info@whoumc.org. And she said, I tried emailing this and I have a question about, I can't remember, and I can't reach you. And this is the wrong email address. And I said, actually even checked with our administrator saying, is there something wrong with the inbox? And everything was working fine. And I replied to her that, no, this is our accurate email address. This is the address you should send this question to. Give it another try. And she really continued. And she got a little bit irritated because she thought that, I don't know, she thought I was maybe making things up. But she could not make it work. And I was feeling, you know, I'm getting the blame here because you don't know how an email address works. And it's really not my fault. But you just have to be patient and say, sorry, you're having troubles with this email address. We run some checks. Everything is working fine on our end. Maybe try another email client and, you know, let us know if you have any problems. Moving on. When it comes to determining how ambitious you can and want to be. Again, you can post once a week. You can come up with something to post once a week. That is not a problem. I promise you, all of you. But you want to be consistent, right? So don't say, oh, you know, now we're going to start our Facebook accounts and we're going to be super active and we're going to post 5 times a day. And then you don't have sort of the staff or the time to do that or the material to do that. Start out small and just see where it goes. And social media does require daily monitoring. You need to check your comments. You need to check your likes. If someone's saying something bad to you, you need to respond to that accurately. Or if someone is sharing a spam link to some site that's really inappropriate and has nothing to do with anything, you need to remove that as fast as you can. So sort of know what you're getting yourself into and set the level where it suits you. Thank you.